Hello and welcome to the Creators Podcast. My name's Richard Beatty, and this episode I'm going to be talking about the KillerBees. Now, obviously, it's one of my biggest creations. I guess it's what I'm best known for. So, around this time of year, you get a lot of inquiries. I've been, there's been a lot of people contacting us about buying the tattoo machines that I build, and I've been quite quiet with it recently. So I thought I'd record this to put it out there, the full story of it, really, because people have heard the beginnings of it and how it started, and in certain places there is bits of information out there, but really I've never told the full story. So so that's what we're going to be talking about. So we need to go back to, obviously, in episode 1, I said about when I started tattooing. I started tattooing when I was 11, and I made my first tattoo machine when I was 12. Now, I didn't know that I was going to end up making tattoo machines when I was, 46, or 39, maybe 38 when I started doing it. So it's a funny, unusual cycle of events that, when you look back, sort of makes sense. But I didn't really plan on doing any of it. It was just stuff that I was doing. So I started tattooing when I was 11, and I made my first tattoo machine. When I was 12, I realised that doing dots in a straight line wasn't very easy with a needle and Indian ink. So I made my first tattoo machine when I was 12, and I was always an artist. I was always drawing on stuff, and I got into airbrushing, and I was doing murals and stuff, and got into airbrushing, and I was painting mobile phones and stuff like that when Nokias were big fat, bricks, and when Nokias were Nokias, really. Then back cars came. I started building custom cars, and I was again doing a lot of airbrushing. And then the recession came, the last recession came, and that put an end to that business. And I then got back into the tattooing. So over the space of, a couple of years, I'd been tattooing a lot, and I'd started Immortal, and obviously my hands had worked really hard for a long time with the airbrushing and everything else that I'd done. And at a point early on, starting Immortal Art Studio, I got an injury in my hand. I started getting a pain in my hand, in my tattooing hand. And tattooing is a very two-handed job. You've got to stretch the skin with one hand, and you control the machine with the other. And what had happened was, I was starting to get a repetitive strain injury. I didn't know it at the time, but I just thought I had a sore thumb, and it was right in the first knuckle next to your palm on my left thumb. And it started to lock. The pain got worse and worse, and my thumb actually started to lock. So it would click. If it got to a certain point, it would click into a position where the tip of my thumb was pretty much touching my palm, and I couldn't undo it. I couldn't straighten it out physically with my left hand by itself. This was extremely agonizing already when it clicked. And now it was stuck there in a cramped sort of agonizing pain. And the next bit was I had to get my other hand to straighten out my thumb. it was excruciating. And it just started to get worse and worse and worse. It progressed really quickly. And well, I mean, you can imagine the problems that it was causing. I was I'm tattooing here, and my thumb all of a sudden clicks into a position about maybe 2 inches away from where it was, sort of thing. So I was messing up tattoos, you know, that I was, and that's the worst thing that like you could be in as a tattooist, like in a position of doing, you know, like I was literally having to do cover-ups 30 seconds after I'd just fucked something up on a regular basis. And yeah, it was just awful. Work became awful. I didn't want to go to work anymore. It was too painful. It was the mental torture was, it was absolutely awful. And when I found out that I went to the doctors, and they said, it's just like that injury that everybody's getting from using mobile phones. I was like, really? Yeah, apparently people get a very similar injury from texting too much. So at least I knew what it was, and he explained that like I needed an operation, and there was a ball on like if you got a rope and you put it over the edge of a table, on a sharp edge of a table sort of thing, and you just moved it backwards and forwards, like just an inch, you know, backwards and forwards. Eventually that bit of rope would get bust up on that point. And so that's what had happened to my tendon because of the shading action of colouring in, essentially. That's what had been going on with my tendon. Now, it might not have been so bad if I wasn't using machines that were very top heavy. I haven't got one to explain it, but you know, you've got a tattoo machine, a traditional coil tattoo machine, which is what I started with. That's a couple of ounces at the top. You know, this is a really heavy machine, and it's nowhere near your hand. It's way above your hand, and then you're trying to hold it with a grip that's generally about 25 mil wide. It's way fatter than a pencil, but you're still in a very cramped up position and trying to grip tight to control the weight that's hanging above your hand. So I realized that it was the machines that was causing the problem. And if that weight balance could be altered, then the level of grip needed to control the weight would be less. Therefore, I wouldn't have to hold the machine so tightly, causing damage to my tendon. So I decided to build a tattoo machine. It wasn't as if I hadn't done it before, you know, and with all my skills from the custom car industry, I'm pretty confident I can make almost anything. So a tattoo machine didn't seem much of a challenge, really, to be honest with you. So the whole everybody that out there making tattoo machines, they were all, and most of them still are. I describe it as it's the same suite in a different wrapper. The geometry, the basics of it, when you go get back down to the basics, is just the same as the one before. It's just a different color, different shape, and you know, people buy it because they think, oh, it's a new thing, but none of the problems were getting sorted. The problem with the weight at the too far up was still there and being repeated, and it's still being repeated a decade on, you know. But so I chucked the whole design of the tattoo machine out the window because I've seen them as all with faults, and I'm not really into copying stuff. So I went back and looked at the thing from with different eyes, you know, like how would you make it? How would I make it, like, without like looking at the other mechanisms that were out there, and the design features? So I'm from the car industry originally, and so a lot of what I did with the KillerBees was actually based on cars. First of all, I looked at what it needed to be. It needed to be comfortable and well balanced. It needed to be very ergonomic, and it needed to reduce the strain in your hand and in your fingers and in in your arm and that. It needed to be hygienic, because so many machines out there on the market weren't then and still aren't now hygienic. You can't clean them properly, and that's just ridiculous. The other main thing, that there was three things. The third thing was it had to be reliable, because the other problem with machines on the market is they very much weren't reliable. And if you drop it on the floor, you're having a bad day, and your client's not getting tattooed unless you've got a backup machine. Because generally a drop from workstation to the floor would unset a coil machine, and it would potentially damage the flimsy internals of a lot of the other machines out there. So yeah, those three things I felt were really important: comfort, hygiene, and reliability. Because it's a tool. It's a tool that we use to produce our work, and it's not a toy, and it's certainly not a sweetie. So I went at it with the ethos of Snap-on, who make the best tools in the world. They're able to put a lifetime guarantee on the tools, because they know that they're going to last a lifetime. And I wanted these things to last a lifetime. I didn't want them to be disposable. I didn't want them to be just using up resources for the sake of it. It's called integrated obsolescence, where large companies that have the design and the business ethos of making as much money as possible and have the design capabilities of doing it can actually work out how long a part is going to last and when it's going to break down, and the design the machine or device so that it will break down at around about that time, so that you have to buy a new one. And it's not a good idea for sales as far as the company's concerned, but I wasn't designing that into a machine. Now, bearing in mind here, I was just making this machine for myself. I wasn't intending on selling it. I had a problem with my hand, and I needed to sort it out, because I don't think anybody can understand unless you've been in this position. And I guess a lot of people with what's going on now in 2020 has been in a position where you're potentially looking at losing your income. Now, I was sat there thinking, looking at my entire career being took away. My doctor was saying that I needed an operation, and I was saying I've just opened a studio and I'm the only tattooist, and I can't take 6 months off, and I need another solution. So like getting an operation wasn't really a solution for me. So I made a brace for my thumb. I used a thermoformable plastic called polymorph. Now, it's something that if anybody's got any problems out there with the tendons, it's a good way of making a brace. I was speaking to someone today about it. You just heat this plastic up and you shape it round. And I just made a little splint for my thumb that went around my thumb like a sleeve. And I was still able to move my thumb, but it stopped it bending into that position, which stopped the clicking, which meant I could tattoo. So not pain-free, but agony-free, So I was tattooing like with my thumb sort of sticking out at a bit of a raj angle, but it worked. It helped me to continue to tattoo while I was working on designing the these tattoo machines. So I played with all sorts of stuff. The first one I actually made was I'd had this thought about using music frequencies and frequencies, and it's called a voice coil motor. There is tattoo machines out there that do exist, I think, now, that are essentially using the same principle, and it works like a speaker. And I made a machine out of a speaker. I used a speaker to do it, just to test the theory, and sure enough, it's here pushing a needle, and at extremely fast speeds, too fast for tattooing, really. But it was very controllable because you could give it different frequencies and stuff. But it was also very heavy, so that it wasn't suitable for what I was trying to do, because ultimately I was going for the balance of the machine. So I started playing around with wax, just carving wax into shapes to see what fit. And then from that point, an old friend that I used to work with us with the cars, he does CAD design and 3D printing, and he did some CAD, and we made the first 3D printed shapes. We played on with different shapes in plastic rather than and we were able to put mortars in them, and they were rough, but you could test the mechanism, the drive mechanism, and the ergonomics of it by in a 3D printed, very rough version of the idea. Really good way of concepting, bringing an idea, a shape, a complex shape, especially into reality, so you can feel it. Because carving them with wax, it takes a long time, and it gets you started. But the 3D printing was a massive help. Then we went to a first working model in aluminium, and this one wasn't designed for the external parts. This was actually like a test bed for the internals, so the outside didn't matter what it looked like. Now this thing was tiny, but it was, it certainly proved concept. My apprentice Rob Richardson, he was able to tattoo with it for quite a long time before we had problems with the motors on the early ones. So but it was nowhere near a production machine yet. It was still just a project, something that it was a long way away. And but the motors were an issue. We needed to. The next thing was, if I wanted it to last for a lifetime, to have that strength and be so robust, I needed a good motor. And obviously I'd had some problems with the earlier motors. So we switched to Maxon, and after a lot of research found that they were just, well, they are good. They're really good, really, really good. If you had like the Bugatti of motors, it's probably Maxon, and then the motors that we use, Fall Harbor, that they're probably the Lamborghini. These are really, really good motors, and the price also shows that. But they're incredibly strong and way overpowered for what we originally needed. But the next step was the first alloy one was Jonathan actually cut it on a 1950s pillar drill that had been converted into a CNC machine. So like this was quite a tractor of a device, really, but it did work, and so we weren't able to get a good finish or anything, and we needed to move on to the final shapes and stuff. So I'd sort of at the time exhausted what Jonathan was capable of doing with his equipment. So I went to a company called Complete Engineering in Carlisle, and big shout out to these guys. They're a small engineering company that takes on all sorts of different jobs. from doing engine work, you know, skimming heads and stuff like that, to making wheels for small gauge trains, and to making KillerBees. They also do a lot for the nuclear industry. They also do a lot for M Sport and Malcolm Wilson with his World Rally cars. So they take on all sorts of jobs, and they'd had what I needed for the next stage of developing the bees. So one of the things that I needed was CAD design on another level, you know, something that from an engineering point of view could be translated into something that could be cut from a solid lump of aluminium, which is how the KillerBees are cut. They're a solid lump of aluminium. So the guys at Complete Engineering very kindly lent me one of their juniors called Sam. Now, Sam is probably the biggest unsung hero with this whole thing, because nobody knows who Sam is really. Sam's the guy who did all the CAD for the actual KillerBees that you see today. Sam's the guy that has cut all of the bodies. Sam's the guy that makes all of the parts. There's been other people involved, like, you know, over the years, but Sam's really ran that whole project within the engineers, and delivered me the parts that I need, how I need them. If I need alterations made, then he's the guy that sorts it out. And yeah, so Complete Engineering, I've never really spoke about them because no one really needs to know where I get my stuff made. And I don't know, it's not like they're looking for business as such in my market, but you know, in this scenario of us explaining how, and you know, the journey, I think that it is important to give those guys a lot of credit for what I've been able to achieve, because they have been with us all the way. It's been a surprisingly long journey, because I didn't expect it to even get to this. Again, I was only making a machine for myself. I had no intention of selling these. That was not the plan at all. I was just making something that hopefully was going to sort out my problem. So we actually made the Bumblebee first. Most people think it was the KillerBee, but it wasn't. It was the Bumblebee. And that machine now, oh, go on here. So for people watching on YouTube, you can see it. For people on the podcast, you need to go to YouTube. But the Bumblebee is a very short machine that sits right inside your hand. All the weight is inside your hand. The idea of it was to put the motor inside the grip, so there was no top weight where the motor was because the grip, the motor and all the heavy bits are inside your hand, and totally achieved that with the Bumblebee. I think it's still the shortest tattoo machine in the world. People don't realize how small this thing is. I could actually make it smaller. Yeah, the Bumblebee came first, and we called it a Bumblebee because it's short, fat, and got a spike coming out of it that stings a little bit. Wasn't really a lot of creativity went on there, really. It just seemed an obvious name to call it. It kind of started as a code name, because like the early drawings of it even looked even more like a Bumblebee. So it was sort of like a code name that sort of stuck, and that's what happened with all the other ones as well. So pretty much. So yeah, the Bumblebee came first, but the mechanism, there was some issues with the drive mechanism. It was creating too much friction, and I hadn't got that nailed yet. There was a few other things that I hadn't got nailed. The depth control mechanism for one. So I switched to a, and there was also the friction problem was causing problems with the motors. So I had a bunch of problems that I had to sort out. So what I did was completely redesign and go for a whole nother machine, because it meant I could put a much bigger motor in. This is where I went to Maxon and started using Maxon motors. I was able to put a much bigger machine motor in it and iron out some of the design problems. And even then, I had a load of issues right the way along the way, working out the depth control mechanism and the drive system and everything like that. It was all right having an idea, oh, we could do it like this, and you make a prototype, and it costs an absolute fortune to do all the CAD and then make the prototype and then get a motor in it and then test it and then realize that it doesn't work and you chuck it out the window. So I'd went through maybe 10 Bumblebee prototypes before I was like, stop. Maybe wasn't a good 8 anyway. I've got at least eight different stages of Bumblebee prototypes sat in there. What's probably going to be a museum one day. And so then we moved on to the KillerBee, and again, same sort of situation. Although, like, you thought you were closer to get it absolutely refined to how you want it, there was a lot of changes that had to be made, but you could only test whether the changes were right if you made a working machine and tested it. So all of the CAD design and although Sam was coming at a discount rate, it was still expensive. And a prototype machine could have each one, I would say, about 1,500 quid to get it to a stage where you could use it and the changes that you have to make, and then make the machine, and then then put a motor in it, and it was expensive. And some of them I was literally just running it for a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and then chucking it in the bin, obviously taking the motor out of it and stuff. And so it took quite a while to refine it. Some of the tolerance in between the push rod and the channel that the push rod sits in, which drives the needle. We were altering the tolerances in that, because that was creating different levels of friction, which was creating different levels of temperature. If we had it too loose, it created a rattle on the needle. If we had it too tight, it created too much friction in the body. So also the different greases were affecting it. So there was a lot of testing and working out and really fine adjustments, machines that looked almost exactly the same as another machine, but there was extensive changes being made to it towards the end. So I got the KillerBee to a stage where I was happy with it. It was as perfect as I could get it. And then started back on the Bumblebee. Actually, we went straight back to the Bumblebee, because what I'd learned with the KillerBee, well, the Bumblebee and then the KillerBee, but what I'd developed in the KillerBee, I was then able to reverse engineer back into the Bumblebee to sort out the problems that we'd had with the Bumblebee originally. So now I've got the KillerBee anyway, and I'm now tattooing with it. And obviously I took my brace off to tattoo, which was the first time I took my brace off in a long time, really. I was wearing it on a night at home as well, because if I moved on the night and my thumb went into a certain position, the little lump on the tendon, what was actually happening was the lump on the tendon, which had now solidified, the bit that was burst up had now solidified into like a hard ball. Well, there's a tube runs through your knuckle. All of your knuckles, there's a tube runs through that your tendon runs through, like a guide tube. And what was happening was that ball was going through the guide tube and getting stuck on the other side. And that's why my thumb was stuck in that position. So if I was asleep and rolled over and knocked my thumb and it moved too far, it would click into that position. And I was then awake in agony. So it was destroying my sleep and everything. It wasn't just tattooing that it was causing problems with. It was picking up a cup of tea and it then clicking into, and I'm spilling cups of tea. You know, it was a constant chronic pain. So the brace really did help. It was massive. So, yeah. So I'd got to the stage where I had a perfect machine and another one on the way. And I'd sort of achieved my goals, really. That's what I'd set out to do. I'd started using it without the brace, and I wasn't getting the same problem. The brace, using the brace and not aggravating the situation had definitely reduced the swelling. So I was able to take the brace off and tattoo with the KillerBee. Now, I was expecting to have problems, but I didn't. And my hand continued to get better, to the point of eventually I had no pain. And, you know, even at home, even sleeping, all that sort of stuff, it was gone, and I was tattooing flat out again. So at this point, I really knew that the whole concept of how that grip was designed. Yeah, there was quite a bit went into the grip, really, to work out. It was a lot to do with balance and weight distribution. The machines are a little bit heavier than a lot of tattoo machines these days, but it's all to do with that balance and having things perfectly weighted. The machine actually will sit on your, balanced on your one finger, and it sits at pretty much perfect tattooing angle. So all I've got to do is gently move my thumb around, and I'm in full control of the machine. And what I found was that I was able to relax my grip so much, and obviously reduce that stress on that tendon, that not only did my hand relax, but I realized that I was carrying a lot of stress in my wrist. So I was able to relax my wrist. And then I realized that I was carrying quite a lot of stress in my shoulder. And so that relaxed. And then I realized that my posture had improved. Now, I've got a bad back. I've had an operation on my back. So it's another thing that I'm very aware of and suffer a lot with. And I noticed that my back was a lot better because my posture was better, because the handling of the machine was so much easier and more flowing. You can hit angles that a lot of machines don't feel comfortable at. Certainly the ones that I was using, and certainly coils, don't feel comfortable at. So yeah, the maneuverability of it was amazing, and it really did reduce stress, not just in my hand, but in my whole tattooing posture. And so at this point, I really had noticed that I'd made something that worked for what I intended it to do. It was super reliable. It was super powerful. It was so easy to clean. I'd completely achieved everything that I wanted to do with it. Now, when you set a goal of doing something, and obviously I wanted to make a tattoo machine, that was my goal. When you achieve a goal, you don't like kind of continue on with it. But it's you know, because I'd done what I wanted to do. But I was sat there thinking that I'd spoke to so many people about it along the way that knew that I was making this machine and knew why I was making this machine. So I'd spoke to a lot of people about hand problems, and realized that I wasn't the only one. And like by a long shot, I was walking around tattoo conventions and realizing that everybody that's got the grip wrapped up fat with kitchen roll and loads of tape around it, and they're doing that for a reason. It's because the hand's fucked. Now, do you think they want to tell the client that the hand's knackered? You know, Do you think I wanted to tell my client that I'm here tattooing with a knackered hand? No, it was embarrassing, you know. So I didn't want people to know. But when I started talking about it, I realized that there is other people in this industry that have got knackered hands and don't necessarily talk about it because, well, think about it. It doesn't look good, does it? You know? So, yeah, I realized that it's quite prolific. It's a thing. It's a big thing. And all of these people must be thinking the same thing that I'm thinking, like, you know, this is my career. This is how I feed my kids. This is, you know, how I pay the bills, you know. So what do you do? And what do they do, you know? So I thought, well, maybe I'll make some. I'll make like 5. So I did. I think I made like 5, or maybe the first batch was maybe 10. I think the first batch was maybe 10. And I didn't really have a plan from this point. You know, like I didn't design it to be manufactured. I designed it for me. So there was no corners cut. Every component in it is the best materials that could be used for that purpose. So there was no corners cut, and it was expensive to make. But I thought, well, you know, people will realize that this is good quality and it serves a purpose of stopping you getting hand strains, increasing the hygiene standards of the tattoo industry, and giving you a machine that your kids are going to inherit if you look after it. So with no breakdowns, more reliability, obviously. So I thought, sod it, I'm going to do it. This is a good thing. So I set about doing the first batch, and that was quite an experience. And obviously, it was an expensive batch of machines to build. I had to buy, you know, more motors because I was just buying them in, you know, 1s and 2s in the early days. So I had to invest now into the first batch of machines, motors, and getting the bodies made and all the parts. And I had no real. I didn't have a sales marketing budget. I didn't have a plan other than to get the machines into the hands of people that would talk about them. And obviously in the tattoo industry, there's the thing that's so huge is being sponsored. It's a bizarre thing, really, because like you don't see joiners getting sponsored off DeWalt, or, you know, mechanics getting sponsored off Snap-on. But in the tattoo industry, there's a lot of sponsoring going on, which is it's a little bit inverse in the way it used to be, where tattooists didn't talk about the equipment that they used, or the inks or anything like that. It was all kept a secret. But now it's all publicly promoted by the tattoo artist, which does help the manufacturers of those products. And the community as it is, likes the sponsorship for the artists. It's a good rub on their ego, and for the company, whether it's ink or machines or whatever, it puts them out there, and people are asking them, "Oh, what tattoo machine are you using?" And they say, "Oh, I'm using the KillerBee," and you know, you do get sales off the back of that. So I was starting on a new plan, but just making it up as I go along, really. I did not expect to be in this situation, you know. So now I'm speaking to tattoo artists, and this is one of the best things that the KillerBees have done for me. It's opened up the doors to speaking to tattooists all around the world. And I started doing tattoo conventions, and I sponsored a few artists, and I started having meetings with supply companies, and one of the biggest supply companies in the country says, "Yeah, we'll take it on. It's fantastic. We want to sell it, but what price are you going to sell it at?" And now I was wanting to, because I know how, compared to everything else that's on the market, I know these things are flipping Bugatti. So I felt it should be at the highest end of the price bracket, but they insisted if they were going to take it on that it needed to match the current pricing, and the design, the manufacturing process, the components, the materials aren't conducive to really working with this price. It's possible, but it meant that like profit for me was very little, especially when you took into account the massive markup that the supply companies demand. So it adds two sides to it. You know, it was a good thing that it was with the supply companies, but at the same time, not that I was losing out a lot. You know, so just 1 second, I'm just gonna switch it on. There we go. So yeah, they kind of screwed the price down. I'd have liked to seen it at about 800 quid. And to be honest with you, it's worth more than that. But that's a ridiculous price for a tattoo machine. But this was as good as it could get. So yeah, they screwed us on the retail price, but they also screwed us on the percentages as well. And essentially, I ended up being forced to sell Bugattis for BMW prices, and that was, in my mind, still a big mistake. It was it maybe put it out there a bit more, and but I think it diluted. It certainly diluted the profits, and it diluted what I was able to do. For instance, that the profits that came from that would have put a new machine on the table a lot sooner than it ever did, you know. So it would afford us to be able to develop, but really it screwed it down to just a wage, you know. So to get a bit more money out of them, I wanted to start customizing them. They'd been designed with the intention of being customized because people who like coil machines, the old school guys, they were always like messing on with stuff and customizing things. And the modern machines weren't really customizable. It was just like, you know, buy a liquor box of quality streets, and you know, you can pick that one and pick that one, and that's what it's like. People have got all these sweeties in the drawer. But I wanted these machines to be customizable, partly because I'm from the custom industry, obviously, with the cars, and partly because of we're working with artists. So that's why the body of the machine has got very plain sides, plain top. It's just a smooth panel. All the panels were the exterior surface was designed to be engraved. So once I'd got a few machines out there, I'd sold a few machines, I'd sponsored some artists, things were starting to get moving, the supply companies were starting selling them. So I started to think about the engraving side of things, and I know I thought this would be easy. I thought, yeah, I'll just find an engraver and it'll engrave it, and then I'll be able to sell that, and then people will want that service, and then I'll be able to get him to engrave more, and then obviously we'll be putting out custom machines. I'll make a little bit off the engraving, and gosh, no. It turns out that it's a bit small for gun engravers, and they want to work in steel, you know, on hard metals, but which pushed us to jewelry engravers. And jewelry engravers, everyone that I contacted tended to be an old man, and they turned around and they says, "A tattoo machine in aluminium. I only work in silver and gold." So I was battering my head against a brick wall until one of the clients at the studio, it was a jeweler, introduces to an engraver that he uses. Thanks for that one, Patrick. And called Mark Hughes, as I remember. I need to get back in touch with that guy. So I sent him a machine, Now then, I sent him. I didn't know what his skill set was like or anything. I'd seen a couple of rings that he'd done and stuff, and so I sent him a machine to engrave, and he only engraved one side of it and sent it back. And because what the plan was, I was going to take off the 13th machine off the production line. Well, I'd pulled off the 13th machine off the production line, and I was sat keeping it because number 13's tightest looking number. So I thought I'll keep number 13. So I wanted a number 13 engraved onto it. So he engraved a number 13 with filigree onto the side of it, sent it back. I looked at it and thought, well, that's like, looks fantastic as far as I'm concerned. But really, it was just it wasn't a fully completed job. It just gave us a suggestion of what he's capable of doing. So now there was that machine with the first 13 just on one side. Eventually, I did actually sell. Someone wanted to buy it, built it, sold it, and I think it's been sold on a couple of times since. And it ended up in the hands of a lass that did ask me. I says, there's a story behind that machine. And she says, I'll tell the sellers. And I says, oh, it's too long, but I will at some point tell that story. So I can't remember who that was. But if you're listening, that's the story with how that machine actually appeared. So I was happy with the work. Don't know how long it took to do that, but I sent off the number 13 machine, and with, you know, just off the work that I'd seen. Now, yeah, it took a long time, a really long time, about 6.5 months long time, for us to get it back. And I was messaging the guy and I was getting really frustrated, and I think he took on quite a chunk of project that like he was having to do in between his normal work. And yeah, it was a lengthy, kind of frustrating process, to be honest with you. And I finally got the machine back, and it was unbelievable. All that waiting was cancelled out. It was just absolutely stunning. And so that was the start of the King Bee. Now that I'm now looking at it and thinking, well, you know, like this kind of needs gold plated. You know, it would look amazing gold plated. And I started to look about for a gold platers, and also like I was looking for a jewelers that could put some stones in it. I hadn't planned on putting stones in it at the start, but it, you know, it would have looked nice if it, you know, hindsight and that. So I started looking about for gold platers, and I found a guy, I think he's down in Essex, called Rob Mitchell. And Rob was doing all sorts of different sorts of gold plating, but I'd actually found him because he gold plated a Toyota Supra engine, and it was all engraved. And so I'd already been, like, it'd been on the radar, as it were. So I contacted him about doing the gold plating, and it turns out his cousin is a jeweler. So we were in a sort of win-win situation here, and I decided to get Rob's cousin to put some stones in the machine. I didn't get it gold plated. I got the stones put in first. I wanted to see it back, see what to do with it next, whether I was going to gold plate it or not. It's, you know, so it came back, and this is the finished product. So again, people listening onto the podcast will have to jump on the YouTube channel if you want to see this, and it would be worth jumping on. So this is the King Bee. It's fully engraved from top to toe. It has 140 rubies in it and 105 diamonds. It's really hard to see, but the the all in the number 13 and around the filigree and around the grape. And so yeah, and that was another situation where it took another hell of a long time to do. Again, you could probably wrap this whole project, funnily enough, up in 13 months. It was about 6.5 months for the diamonds, and it was about 6.5 months for the engraving, and there's a 13 on the side of it, and it totted up to about 13 months worth of waiting for this machine. And I realized that although it looks absolutely amazing, it's not a service that I could sell, because people just aren't that patient. You know, you're not gonna. I couldn't put engraving on my website and say, "Oh yeah, we're doing engraving," and then it take 6.5 months to get one back. You know, so yeah, I was a little bit stumped with it, but Robert said, "Can I do a machine for you? You know, like, will you give us a free run on one?" And I said, "Yeah, why not?" And so, you know, he says, "Me and my cousin will do a full job on it. We'll gold plate it, and we'll put some stones in it and stuff." So I sent them a body and a grip, and they started work on it, and they kept quite a lot of it secret for quite some time. And I guess till the end of it, I maybe did get some pictures of you know, like progress stuff, but it didn't really register what they were doing with it until till it was fully finished, you know. And this showed us the finished tattoo machine, and it had love in, there weren't diamonds, there were CZs on one side of the motor body and hate on the other side of the motor body in CZs, and then black CZs around the grip. I think there's some black on the motor body as well, and it was gold plated. So looked absolutely stunning. And now this is a machine that I didn't have a customer for, and I didn't know what I was going to do with. It was a bit of a promotional project and what have you. So a lot of people know that I'm quite big on the law of attraction and how your thoughts become things, and the universe delivering certain things to you. So I mean, you start looking at this machine, and it's got love on one side and hate on the other. And one of my sponsored artists, Willie G, who had the first rose gold plated KillerBee from over in Northern Ireland there. Willie had been guest spotting at this tattoo studio, which is the one that was featured on Miami Ink, which is called Love Hate, owned by Army James. And so he knew Army personally, and his studio is called Love Hate. So there was a little bit of a link there. I thought, well, if anybody should be having this machine, it really should be, you know, and it's a promotional project. It really should be Army James. Next thing, I get a message off Willie G saying, "Are you going to be at London Tattoo Convention?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course I am. Why?" He says, "Well, I'm getting tattooed off Army, so I thought you might want to meet him." And I says, "Well, that's funny. I've got this gold machine with bling all over it, and love on one side and hate on the other. So yeah, I'd love to meet him because I've got a machine for him, as it happens." And so we met up at London Tattoo Convention, and I gave Army the machine, and yeah, he's had another one since, and yeah, it was the first real celebrity artist that had their hands on one of the KillerBees. And again, I think it did well for Rob as a promotional project, and it did well for us as well. And you know, that association with Army, and yeah, so it's just mad how things can happen and unfold to deliver things that you're looking for, you know, like I don't know. What are the chances? Come on, what are the chances? Rob didn't even know that like Army James had a shop called Love Hate. There was no intention at that time. It was just pure coincidence. So yeah, I think that one worked out really well. But anyway, we started smashing the conventions, and we were really busy selling machines at this point, and I started engraving because of obviously it was going to be a pain in the neck to get someone else to do it. I thought, sod it, I'm just going to learn to engrave myself. So I bought the engraving equipment, which, to be fair, wasn't cheap. It cost about a couple of grand to get everything that I needed, but it meant that I was able to engrave the machine. So then I had to go through a process of learning how to engrave, which was quite a steep learning curve. But one of the things that I've always loved about the engraving, apart from the engraving itself, because it's like such an addictive thing to do, is the fact that I created the canvas which I'm now doing my art on. And that canvas was designed to do art. So I'm putting art on something that I created that then goes out there and does a shit ton more art. It's a strange sort of Terminator type thing, you know, but I really like the fact that that I'm putting art onto a machine that's designed to create art. So yeah, the engraved machines really sort of got us noticed in America. The maybe partly to do with Army, but I don't think it was, to be honest with you. I think it was more the King Bee and people seeing that people in America like that sort of stuff. They've got more guns than we have, you know. So the engraving took off quite a lot in America. I sent a lot of machines over there that were engraved, and then obviously it picked up over here as well. And I don't know how many machines that I've engraved to date, but there's been a lot of them. And obviously, we're still like sponsoring artists, and what I found was that a lot of them that we sponsored weren't, you know, we were going to these conventions and they were putting up the banners and stuff like that, and they like it from the point of view that, oh, I'm sponsored by KillerBee tattoo machines, but like when they don't bother putting anything in a post about the machine that they're using, and you know they're forgetting to tag you and stuff, and you know it becomes one or two posts and then it becomes constant. You know, you start to realize you've got to chase people to actually, once you get them the machine, they say, oh yeah, I'll do the work for you, I'll sing your praises, I'll sell loads of machines, and then they put like 3 posts on Facebook and then they don't do anything again and still continue to use the machine. Now a lot of them do continue to you know, the taggers, and but it was getting very apparent that a lot of people just wanted sponsored for a free machine, and they didn't have any intentions of doing anything back for it. It was there's a lot of takers in this industry, you know, there's not a lot of givers, but so yeah, it became a problem. And what I realized was that people who had bought a machine, that paid top price for a machine, were singing its praises and tagging me and tagging the machine and doing reviews on the machine, talking about the machine, selling the machines to the friends more, considerably more than the people who had been sponsored. And it started to become a big thing that obviously, you know, I'm chucking a lot of money's worth of machines at these lot, and they're doing the bare minimum to not enough. And that doesn't count for all of them, by the way. That's just like a majority, to be fair. But and then on the other side, we've got people who owe me nothing, were singing my praises and the machine's praises way louder. And because I'm from the car industry, and because I've you know, spent a lot of time around car clubs and the car culture, I seen very early on what was actually going on. And you can compare it to the likes of Volkswagens, for instance. The Volkswagen clubs and culture and community, it's very tight, and they're very proud of the Volkswagens, and they'll get Volkswagen tattoos, for God's sake. They'll you know, they wear Volkswagen clothes. They all ride about on, like, you know, skateboards and do Volkswagen things that they do at the Volkswagen meetings, and they have Volkswagen meetings, and you know, they have Volkswagen shows, and they have Volkswagen clubs, and they don't do it because Volkswagen gave them a car. They do it because they love it, and that's why people were behaving like they were with the KillerBees. You know, it wasn't through that, and it wasn't through anything that I'd done for them. It was just because they love it. And so what I seen was a community starting to form that was a little bit unique, because there wasn't a lot of that going on. Everybody else, all the other machine manufacturers, people were doing it because they were trying to get sponsored, or you know, or sponsored. But like this was different, and there were different kinds of people. It was very clear there was different type of people. So this is where the KillerBee crew started. I wanted to not so much move away from the sponsored artist, but I wanted to recognize the work that people were putting in, the support that I was getting from these people who I'd gave nothing to in return. So I wanted to create something for them, to give them a bit of recognition, and also to strengthen up the community a little bit, just bring it together a little bit. So that's where I created the KillerBee crew, which is an owners club. Anybody who owns a KillerBee can jump on the page and, you know, be part of that community. You don't even have to sign a form or anything. If you've got one of those machines, then you're in, you know. And you know, what I want to do with the KillerBee crew is tighten it up a little bit and like turn it into a proper club. But so that's what that's where the KillerBee crew came from. And then I found another thing that I noticed was that I was teaching a lot of people how to tattoo. There was people buying machines, and they weren't just buying them off me. They were buying them off supply companies in America, in the UK, in Europe. And I was getting bombarded with people asking me how to use the machines, how to line with them, how to pack with them, how to tattoo with them. And I was spending a huge amount of time just trying to give these people advice, you know, and because it all came back to me. Everybody knew that, like, well, most people that bought a machine, a lot of them knew that it was me that made them. So regardless of who they bought them off, any problems, any questions or anything like that came directly to me. So I'd not only been spanked on price, but I was also getting spanked on service as well, because I wasn't getting paid for that, was I? So, but anyway, it's the community that was forming, the customer base. It was now worldwide. You know, it was everywhere, and we were starting to like upscale. I was constantly reinvesting into the next batch of machines, and we got to a stage where we'd been doing 25s, batches of 25 for a long time, and then we had to upscale because of a big order that didn't come through. But we had to upscale from 25 to 250, and it was a massive jump for us. So, you know, as we were growing, we're doing more conventions and stuff. And at this point, I was still a one-man band at this point, you know, like doing all the work, building all the machines, doing all the polishing, doing all the conventions, and still tattooing. I didn't stop tattooing. Like, I carried on like doing the tattooing as well. So this was very much in my spare time that became to the point that I didn't have any spare time. So I needed to get someone to help us. So I spent quite a long time training a lad up, and yeah, it's we've got a bit of a production line going, and then I felt that I was able to put a little, you know, pull back a little bit from it so that I could de-stress a bit and focus more on the tattooing because I was so torn away from that. And so I pulled back for a little bit, and it didn't take long before me taking my eye off the ball. We ended up with a huge return rate. Return rate being the amount of machines that were coming back that were faulty. Now, bearing in mind, I'd barely got any machines that were faulty, the ones that I'd built. So I wasn't used to returns, let alone a 40% return rate. The machines weren't being built how I'd shown, and there was a lot of corners being cut, and there was a lot of issues. And we ended up with a 40% return rate and a lot of irate customers. Now, when I started, obviously when you start getting complaints flying in through the door and they were arriving at me, at that point I started to realize we had quite a major problem. So, things had to stop. So, I was back to me again. Found that doesn't matter how much you stress how important things are, the little things, the details, the fine things, the finesse on building these machines. It doesn't matter how important you stress it is, people still disregard it and just think, oh, sorry, it doesn't matter, and just sling them together and hit and hope. And so it was a huge problem. So I ended up back by myself there, building the machines again and putting out fires all over the place of pissed off supply companies in America, in the UK, pissed off customers all over the world. It was an absolute nightmare. Took a long time to sort out. I didn't feel I was being very productive for probably a good 6 months. I was just putting out fires, trying to, keep people or get people happy again that were extremely pissed off with this. So, when you send a machine to America, it costs a fortune in import tax when it lands on their land. And the same thing happens when it comes back. So it's not even just the logistics of moving these machines around the world and having to then them come back to be repaired and then send them back out again. It's the sheer cost of it. So it was hitting us in a lot of ways. I had to send out new machines. I had to repair a lot of machines. I had to pay a lot of import tax and postage and all foot the bill sort of thing. So it was quite crippling, really. And it certainly, how do you put this? I just lost a bit of love for it. I began to hate it because it became a noose around my neck. I'd worked so hard to build something up to a stage that it was really getting going. And because I mean, it wasn't just that I did to, focused on my tattooing. I had to because I was short staffed at the studio at the time. So the tattoo studio, which was my bread and butter, that had funded the KillerBees all the way, was now having problems and it needed my attention. So I had to pull myself away from making the machines and go back to tattooing. It's not something that I really wanted to do. I was wanting to move towards the machines, but either way, I come back to the KillerBees and it's in the right shit state. I wound things down. I didn't do any promotion or anything. I didn't want to sell any more machines because I was busy fixing the ones that were fucked. And so I wound things down quite a lot, and it's continued along that way, really, because I'm still tattooing, because the KillerBees do take a lot of attention, and if I post a machine like on social media,
then it creates interest, and then I have to like sell machines. Now I keep the website out of stock, because it used to be that orders just came in on the website. It's an e-commerce website, so the orders just came in. It pings up in your emails and your app, and machines sold. Well, when that happens and you haven't got any built, for example, you've got the parts that's out there, but you've been busy tattooing, so you haven't got any built, and ping machine sells, you've only got a matter of time before you need to get that built and posted off to them, or else these people are going to be, where's my machine at? So the reason that I keep the machines out of stock on the website is because it restricts access to them. If someone wants a machine and they've contacted me, and I'm able to say to them, look, I'm probably not going to make this machine until the weekend, and by the time I get it boxed up and ready to go, it could be a couple of weeks. Is that all right? And they say, yeah. So that person knows that they know that I'm busy, they know that I've got stuff on, and they're quite happy to wait. I'm happy to deal with those people, but when they're coming out of the blue, at 3:00 in the morning, ping, machine sold, and then the next day someone's messaging you with question marks saying, when am I getting my machine? And then, or even like 3:00 in the morning, the message, I've just bought a machine, when will it arrive? And cost 3:00 in the morning, they're in a different country, but they expect me to be answering, they can see I'm online and stuff. So the messages directly, and like, I bought a machine, when do you think it'll arrive? And then the next thing, like 20 minutes later, you get question marks. Yeah, like this is an unbelievable thing, because in the tattoo industry, you see people, and I've had the very same people moaning about tattoo customers, asking a question at 2:00 in the morning and then sending question marks because they haven't responded. I see tattooists going off about this all the time, but I have had cases where a tattooist that has went off about that has actually done it to me. It's infuriating, and yeah, but I just don't need the something like that controlling my life, i.e. having to do something when my phone pings and I have to jump into to action. So that's why I keep the machines out of stock on the website, so I don't have to so I can make them when I want to make them and deal with who I want to deal with, rather than just someone who comes out of the blue. So obviously I'm not selling a lot of machines at the minute, although I do put up little batches now and again. I've got some ready at the minute, actually. But I'm still looking after all the machines that are out there. I've still got parts. I still service the machines. I still look after, if anybody's got a problem, I'm always there speaking to people constantly about, what to do. I'm giving people advice on repairing things remotely. And if the problems can't be sorted, then they get sent into us and I repair the machine. Which brings us to another problem with the doing that, and that's the hygiene bombs that I get sent. As I said right at the start, these machines were designed to be easy to clean, to increase the hygiene standards in the tattoo industry. And don't get us wrong, a lot of the machines that come back for servicing or any repairs or anything are clean, but there's a percentage of them that aren't, and it's a reasonably high percentage. And I just think it's absolutely disgusting. Not just that there's tattooists out there that don't clean the machines and they're tattooing people with this, that, the next person's getting tattooed off a dirty machine, and the same people will be on Facebook saying, these lockdowns are wrong, we're the cleanest industry out there, we sterilize everything and everything's clean to a surgical standard, and we're the cleanest industry. And I call bollocks, because I've seen these people's machines, and it got to the stage where the insults, I mean, I take it as an insult because it's really insulting. It's really ignorant to send your machine to the person who built it, who made it in such a shit up state when it was designed to be cleaned. It's shocking. And I don't see why I should have to unpackage that in my workshop and have to deal with somebody else's mess because I've got to take that machine to bits. I've got to, it's I've got